you ever get that sinking feeling that you're alive, but not really living? Like you're going through the motions, doing what's expected, keeping up appearances, but deep down, you know something's missing. Carl Jung called this the crisis of the modern man. Not a lack of success, not a lack of comfort, a lack of soul. And that might just be what's draining you, not your job, not your schedule, not your responsibilities. What's eating you from the inside is the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be. Here's the truth. Most people are asleep, wide-eyed, smiling, productive, but asleep, numb to themselves, disconnected from their essence. And the saddest part? They think that's normal. They think that's life. Wake up, work, scroll, sleep, repeat. Jung called this living through the persona, a social mask we all wear to fit in, to be liked, to avoid rejection. But here's the catch. The more you cling to that mask, the more you forget who you are. And that's the real waste, because while you're busy playing a role, your real self is fading out. Real living starts the moment you commit to knowing yourself. Jung said it best, what you don't make conscious will control you. Let that sink in. Every fear you bury, every wound you ignore, every part of you that you silence just to keep things easy, all of that is running the show behind the scenes. And until you turn around and face it head on, you're not the one making decisions. Your pain is. Your insecurity is, your unresolved past is, the process of facing yourself, Jung called that individuation. It's the journey of becoming who you truly are, not what your parents wanted, not what society expects, not what's trending on your feed, but the you that exists under all the noise. And yeah, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, because it asks you to challenge everything you've built your identity on. You start realizing that a lot of what you've called me was just survival, just performance, just fear. There was a moment in my life when I looked back at a major decision I had made years earlier. At the time, it seemed smart, safe, respected, even celebrated. But deep down, something had always felt off. I couldn't explain it, just a weight I carried. Only later, after doing the inner work, did I understand that choice wasn't mine. It was my persona's. It was who I thought I needed to be in order to be accepted. And the day I had the guts to walk away from that version of myself, I finally exhaled. I felt real for the first time in years. That's why Jung paid so much attention to symbols, to dreams, to the subconscious. He knew the mind speaks in its own language, and that the answers we chase out there through achievements, distractions, even relationships, are already within us. But here's the thing. You have to get quiet enough to hear them, and most of us aren't. We're overstimulated, overcommitted, overconnected. But underneath all that noise is the voice of your soul, and if you don't listen, it screams. So now I'll ask you, do you know who you really are? Have you actually stopped and asked, with brutal honesty, what your soul has been trying to tell you? Or are you keeping busy just to avoid the truth? Because the truth is, this world is full of escape. Routes, endless content, constant chatter, more tasks, more goals, more everything. But what you might need is less distraction, less pretending, less running, and more presence. More clarity, more courage to face what's been buried. Jung once wrote that your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. That one hits hard, because it means the key to everything you're searching for isn't in the next milestone. It's inside. And that means the time for waiting is over. The time for living half asleep is over. You don't need another year to pass to feel alive. You need to choose it. Now, most people spend their lives waiting for permission, waiting for the right time, waiting for a crisis dramatic enough to force a change. But here's the truth. The only sign you need is already there. It's that quiet discomfort inside you, that unease when you're alone. That little voice that keeps whispering, This isn't it. That's your signal. And yet when it shows up, most people shut it down. They drown it out with noise, with scrolling, with distractions, with overworking, with anything that helps them not feel. And that's the tragedy, because the longer you ignore your soul, the louder it has to scream. The longer you postpone your real growth, the more life starts to feel heavy, restless, flat. Jung said the greatest tragedy is not death. It's reaching the end of your life without ever meeting yourself. Think about that. Living your whole story without ever knowing the author inside. Because when you live for the outside, for the likes, for the applause, for the validation, you stop listening to your own voice. But eventually your body breaks down, your mind rebels, your energy crashes, and you're left staring at a mirror asking, how did I get here? And the answer is step by step, decision by decision. Every time you chose what was easy over what was true, every time you abandoned yourself just to fit in. But it doesn't have to stay that way. That inner emptiness you've been carrying, that's not a flaw, that's a call. That's your real self trying to come through. That's your next chapter trying to break the surface. And the moment you decide to stop running and actually face what's there, everything changes. Because when you do the inner work, your outer world realigns. Not by magic, but by coherence. Because now, finally, you're living in sync with yourself. I've watched this happen countless times. People who spent years stuck, numb, performing a life that wasn't theirs, and then, boom, one honest moment, one conversation, one rock bottom, and something clicks. And in that second, everything starts to rearrange. Because when you choose yourself, really choose yourself, the universe responds. Not because it owes you anything, but because you're finally moving in truth. So let me ask you, are you ready to do that? Are you ready to stop faking it, stop performing, stop living for expectations that were never yours to begin with? Because no one else is going to rescue you. No partner, no degree, no job title, no external thing will give you what you've been avoiding giving yourself. Permission. Permission to evolve, permission to let go, permission to begin again. So pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what have I been avoiding? What truth do I already know but haven't had the guts to face? What version of me is screaming to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen? Because that version, that's your real life. And it's been waiting for you this whole time. The answers you need, they're not in the next podcast, the next self-help book, the next breakthrough. They're in the stillness, they're in the discomfort, they're in the parts of you you've labeled too messy, too broken, too much. But those are the exact pieces that hold your power, because the moment you stop editing yourself and start owning every single part of who you are, that's the moment everything opens. So maybe today is the day you stop looking for more and start becoming more. The day you stop surviving and start choosing. The day you stop hoping things will fix themselves and you take responsibility for your own healing. And yeah, it's scary. But you know what's scarier? Living a life that doesn't belong to you. Performing forever. Smiling while slowly burning out. No, you weren't made for that. Most people think growth means adding things. More knowledge, more productivity, more goals. But Carl Jung teaches the opposite. True growth starts with removal. Shedding what no longer serves, stripping away the noise, letting go of the roles, the identities, the masks. Real growth is subtraction. It's peeling back everything you've used to protect yourself and finally allowing what's real to take up space. And the reason so many people feel stuck isn't because they're not doing enough. It's because they're full of the wrong things. Overloaded with pressure, expectations, noise, and there's no room left for truth. That's why people feel exhausted even when life looks good on paper. They've got achievements, followers, income, but no peace. Because peace doesn't come from how things look. It comes from how aligned they feel. Jung once said that depression isn't the enemy, it's a messenger, a visitor, a shadow sitting at your table, quietly waiting for you to ask why it came. And that shadow, that sadness, that emptiness, it shows up when you've gone too far from yourself. When you've ignored your truth for too long, when your soul is begging to be heard again. And what does that take? Silence. And silence takes guts. Because silence brings everything to the surface. The thoughts you've been avoiding, the questions you've been dodging, the truth you've been pretending not to know. That's why people fill their lives with noise. The noise is a shield, but when you finally get quiet, you hear something else. You hear your soul. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can't go back to pretending. From that moment on, something shifts. The same distractions that used to entertain you feel empty. The relationships you used to tolerate feel heavy. The spaces you used to shrink yourself to fit in suddenly feel suffocating. Because once you've tasted alignment, you can't accept disconnection anymore. And this is where individuation begins to transform everything. It's no longer about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what was always there. The parts of you that got buried beneath shoulds and musts and don'ts. But here's where most people hesitate. Because growth like this has a cost. You'll lose people. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose the old version of yourself. But in that loss, you gain clarity. You gain strength. You gain a life that feels real. And real doesn't mean perfect. It means honest, whole, integrated. Because you've stopped running. You've stopped hiding. You've stopped outsourcing your worth. You've come home. And yes, that path is messy. You'll stumble. You'll doubt. You'll grieve what you thought you needed. But that's the price of authenticity. And it's worth every tear. Because once you're living in truth, the weight you've been carrying drops. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to earn your own existence. You just live from the inside out. And that's where real freedom begins. So what do you need to let go of right now to get there? What identity have you outgrown but keep clinging to because it's familiar? What part of you have you silenced because you were afraid it wouldn't be accepted? That's the work. Not fixing, not adding, but returning, reclaiming, reconnecting. And that process is where power is born. Because when you know who you are, no one can take that from you. You know you've changed when the things that used to distract you don't hit the same anymore. When small talk drains you, when fake smiles exhaust you. When the chaos you once found comfort in now just feels like noise. That's not you becoming cold. That's you waking up. That's your system rejecting anything that doesn't feed your soul. And in a world that thrives on surface-level living, that awakening makes you different. And different can feel lonely, but it also makes you powerful. Because now you see, you feel, you sense when something isn't real. And more importantly, you trust yourself enough to walk away from it. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. What triggers you, what annoys you, what stirs something deep inside, that's a mirror. That's a reflection of a part of you that hasn't been healed, hasn't been claimed, hasn't been integrated. And unless you face that part, you're going to keep blaming the world for what you haven't resolved inside. You'll keep projecting. You'll keep attracting the same pain in different faces, because your outer world will always reflect your inner split. Facing that takes maturity. It takes humility. It takes brutal honesty. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't keep pretending that the problem is always them. You realize it's been you, not in a shameful way. Not in a self-blaming way, but in a liberating way. Because if you've been the one in your own way, then that means you can step out of the way. You can make different choices. You can break the cycle. And that's where the real question comes in. Do you want to keep hiding behind old stories, old wounds, old fears, or are you finally ready to use them, to turn them into fuel, to transmute them into wisdom, strength, and clarity? Because transformation isn't a switch, it's a decision. One you make again and again. Every day you wake up and decide not to betray yourself again, not to minimize your needs, not to wear the mask. Jung believed the goal of life wasn't perfection, it was wholeness. That means accepting your mess, owning your flaws, honoring your contradictions. You are not a brand, you are not an algorithm, you're a soul, a wild, layered, evolving soul. And the more you try to edit yourself to fit into boxes, the more drained you feel. Because that's not alignment, that's self-abandonment. And the longer you stay out of alignment, the more your body will speak. Anxiety, fatigue, irritability, restlessness. Those aren't just random symptoms. They're messages. They're your inner world crying out for coherence, crying out for honesty, crying out for you to stop living on autopilot and start paying attention. So pause, really pause. Ask yourself, what part of me am I avoiding? What truth am I afraid to say out loud? What have I convinced myself is just the way it is, but deep down I know it's not right? That's the doorway. That's where your growth is waiting. Not in some distant future, not after you've fixed everything, but right there in the discomfort, in the truth you haven't spoken yet. And when you start living from that place, from that honesty, something incredible happens. You stop being drained. You stop chasing. You stop feeling like life is just something you have to get through, because now you're in it, present, awake, aligned. Maybe right now you're realizing that this life you've been living, this fast-paced, people-pleasing, numbed-out version of yourself, it's not yours anymore, and maybe it never really was. Maybe it was just the survival strategy, the way you coped, the way you kept the peace, the way you avoided being abandoned, rejected, misunderstood. But now you're ready for something else. You're ready to come home to yourself, to stop waiting, to stop watching from the sidelines while your soul begs for a seat at the table. And here's the truth. You don't have to wait for rock bottom. You don't need another breakdown. You don't need some dramatic spiritual sign. The discomfort you're feeling right now, that's enough. That's your wake-up call. That's your soul saying, we can't do this anymore. And when your soul speaks like that, you don't ignore it. You honor it, you move with it. You take one small step toward yourself, then another, then another. That's how you rebuild. Carl Jung taught that each of us carries a blueprint inside, a map to our becoming. But the path isn't laid out in front of us. It's carved out from within, with every decision to return. Every time you say no to what dims you, every time you say yes to what lights you up. And the most powerful part? You don't need to figure it all out. You just need to start. Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when everything is clear. Now. Start now. With what you have, with who you are, with the truth that's already inside you. And it won't be clean. It won't be easy. You'll stumble, you'll question, you'll feel like giving up, but keep going. Because nothing will ever compare to the moment you wake up one day and realize you're not pretending anymore. You're not performing, you're not surviving, you're living on your terms, in your truth, fully, deeply, unapologetically you. And the beautiful thing? When you live like that, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, a reminder, a light, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And in a world starving for authenticity, your courage to be whole is revolutionary. This is the message of Carl Jung, a radical, soul-deep invitation to wake up, return to yourself, and stop wasting your life on anything less than what sets your soul on fire. And now I want to know, what part of this message hit you the hardest? What part of you is ready to be seen again? Share it in the comments, let it out, let it begin here. And if this spoke to you in any way, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking this journey together.